Hello, this is Sam Simon, also known as Dementia Man, for the week of March 24th, an important week. And I've got a special guest today. You can see his name as C. Nathaniel Brown, but it's Chuck Brown, who is the founder and executive director of a relatively new organization called Expose Dementia. And it shares our mission of bringing more attention to the larger community of the growing uh, incidence of cognitive decline. And I think he's going to tell you he hates the word dementia like I do, but it's out there. And then engage the community. But I think exposed dementia's got I've got a play and working on a book. Chuck, I think, is going to tell us about a lot more. So, Chuck, welcome to the podcast.
Thank
And
you.
tell us a little bit about exposed dementia, your mission. And by the way, we're going to end. There is a conference in which I will have a small part.
Which part?
And in the Baltimore area on the 28th and
28th through the 30th.
28th to the 30th. So welcome, Chuck, and tell us a little bit about both dementia and yourself.
Thanks, Sam, for having me. I appreciate it. I'm super excited about being here talking with you. I'm super excited about you being a part of the conference and us collaborating to continue with these missions that we share. Exposed Dementia is a relatively new nonprofit organization that focuses on the arts and media as tools and resources to be able to help us educate for those living with dementia and their care partners, as well as advocating. And so, what that looks like is it can be a book, it can be a movie, it could be a stage production, it could be artwork, it could be Legos. We want to be able to utilize these things as a way to open up doors to be able to share this information, to let people know what dementia is, what are the risk factors, what are some of the different types of dementia, how do we get involved, how do we get more people to understand it. And so this organization came about from a group of people, many of them who were a part of the Remember Me, Dementia in the African American Community documentary that I interviewed. And so we decided to come together and say, you know what, you're doing this over here, you're doing this over here. Let's come together and expose dementia. The more that we can do collectively, the easier it is for these words that some of them we don't like dementia, but it's a taboo word, especially in the African American community. And so we want to be able to talk about it more so that it is not something that you feel like you can't talk about. And so when you asked me before about the communities that we serve, we want to expose dementia to everyone, but it started with me personally and my experience with my family. And so then it expanded to my community, and then it expanded to my city, and then it expanded to states, and now it's expanded all over the country and all over the world because we understand the impact that dementia is having all over the world. So it's not just targeting me and my family, it's not just targeting Sam and his family, it's targeting everyone. And so the more we can come together and collaborate, the more we will be able to expose dementia.
Yes, and I say it all the time, and I'm writing my book version of my play, which is expanded my story,
Mhm.
that the aha for me was, wait a minute, it's the baby boomer and their children. Those are the boomer has been still the largest, though it's gotten smaller,
Right.
and but there are millions and millions of folks, and one of the reasons I love or feel it's urgent to increase awareness is that there are now medicines and treatments that could not be conceived of before. And then you raised something, and maybe we'll come back to it because I don't know. You mentioned the possibility that within the African American culture and communities that the word might have a different or stronger or a unique kind of impact. And I'd be interested in that a little bit. And we're going to maybe and you are the producer or executive producer of a film, is that right?
Correct.
And that's going to be released at the conference, right?
Yeah, so the people, all of you who are listening and watching, you're gonna get a chance to see a portion of Sam do his thing, and then right after that, you're gonna see my documentary, Remember Me, Dementia in the African American Community. So that's my commercial for you to go to exposedementia.org, get your tickets, and come out. But what the film does is it shares those stories that a lot of times we don't talk about in the Black community. And so if we're having these conversations, it makes it a little bit easier to go on to the next thing. Now we can talk about prevention. Now we can talk about medication. And those are things that we haven't talked about a lot in the African American community because of the mistrust and the distrust for the medical community and for the government and so many other things. So there are a lot of layers to this conversation about dementia. Not to mention the cost to care for people. And a lot of times we do that in our homes without looking for those other resources. And so it presents challenges across the board that, again, having this documentary, being able to educate people about, first of all, what is dementia and how is it different from Alzheimer's and what are the other possibilities or other types of dementia. And now we can talk about some of the risk factors, some of the signs that we see all the time, yet we want to be in denial. And we can't do that any longer.
Yes. And just a note on that little point, Alzheimer's is a disease, period.
Correct.
It's the cognitive decline associated with it is what we call dementia, but
Mhm.
it is a cognitive decline. The DSM-5 now calls it a neurocognitive disorder, major or minor, which is a description of the disease,
Mhm.
which is popularly referred to at some point dementia.
Right.
It is such a degrading word that you know I like cognitive disorder. I'm cognitively impaired, is how I refer to it. And we'll see. We'll see what happens to it. There's a movement afoot by some folks to get Congress to pass a law that prohibits the federal government from using the word dementia. I had not known. That's what happened around the word retarded. And
Right.
once the feds passed a law and couldn't use it, then the popular use decreased. Well, we'll see.
Hmm.
You raise just so many things on which we are in sync on. Um, One of the things that I focus on, and we haven't chatted about it before, is the um, movement of emerging movement for promoting accompanied suicide. And one of the dilemmas about that, because I'm a voice against it. I,
Hmm.
those who support it argue you should have human agency. If you decide you don't want to go through this, we
Hmm.
have a right not to, and you should be able to do it with dignity, death with dignity, if you, what some people might call it. Uh,
Right.
Typically, it's not available in this context in the United States. There is some movement for allowing if you're within 6 months to make the decision um, that they're allowing that. Um, it's mainly done in Europe, but the the dialogue around that um, is something that I think is driven in part by cost. And so you talk about that too. Um, because I can do what I just did. You shouldn't kill yourself. You should live. You can live quite because you have to give informed consent for suicide. That may be months. I mean, more than six.
Right.
You know, um, and so you're cutting your life short anyway, and and then you might have something to contribute by if you live through it. Maybe I like to say maybe there's one tiny thing in me that will add a nanosecond or
Mhm.
or increase the time by which we get a cure by just a nanosecond or any time. We have things to contribute. But the I keep hearing that I don't want to the cost. Now, first of all, poverty levels in the African American community may even be greater. You know, I talk in my play about cognitive navigators, which is the wife, the husband, or family partner. Um, and um, the, I I don't know, people know the Medicare now pays for a cognitive navigator for people with breast cancer. A breast cancer navigator. Susan, my wife, had breast cancer, and we it was a long time ago. It was in the early 2000s. We were beginning to hear about breast navigators. Now Medicare pays for them, but nobody's talking about cognitive navigators. So I want
Right.
to just add that and just Chuck and I are going to find ways to maybe we'll just take our shows on the road together somehow.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah. Is there so your film is makes this case, but can you tell us just a little bit more about it?
Yeah, sure. So basically what I did was I started with my family. Because at the time I had three family members who were living with dementia. Two of them, my aunt and my uncle, were in the same facility, but they didn't know each other. And we lost several family members. So for me, it was okay. Let me talk to my family and see if they'd be willing to be a part, which was a hard ask because, again, this isn't something that we've ever talked about as a family. And so once they agreed to do it, I interviewed myself. I share my part of the story, my mother, my cousin, who my aunt um, is going through it right now. And so once I had that, I said, let me reach out and talk to some other people. So we talked to researchers, we talked to neuropsychologists and psychiatrists. We talked to other people living with dementia. We talked to caregivers. We talked to adult day centers. So we wanted to bring all of this information together to talk about, again, what is it? How do you deal with it? Caregiver depression and stress. What are some ways that we can overcome these things? How can we prevent it? Looking at things like diet and sleep, exercise, socialization, as you mentioned earlier, all of those things that will help us to maintain our cognitive abilities for longer. We want to be able to emphasize that as well. So we don't want to paint the doom and gloom that, all of this is happening and there's nothing that we can do. No, there are things that we can do. There are things that we can do to help those living with dementia. There are also things that we can do to help ourselves as caregivers and individuals to try to live better so that we can be stronger and impact our family members and loved ones longer without a lot of the things that tend to hinder us as we get older with things like cancer and dementia or Alzheimer's or some other thing like that. But if we're able to do more to prevent it, we'll be able to live a better quality of life for longer. And so we wanted to incorporate that into the documentary as well.
Now that's great and so important. I was a care partner for my wife, caregiver. I call it love partner. It depends on your relationship, but husband and wife in particular, there's both an obligation, although there are some who can't handle it. There are
Right.
stories of, oh, they got the disease and they get a divorce. Sometimes they do that for money reasons too.
Mhm.
And But if you're in love with somebody, as hard as it can be, I've come to believe that the most significant act of love is being with somebody during these times, and particularly if it's their last moments.
Right.
Um, I say in my book, I've said it before, it's what love really means. And so oddly, it is, and that it is such a gift. Having said that, having been the caregiver with somebody with breast cancer, and to be clear, the doctors had pulled me aside and said, she's not going to make it. She's an unlikely survivor. So but there was a good period of time, and she was, because she had a post-double mastectomy lump. And as they were trying to figure out what it was, and like everybody went dark. So I got that close to it, unlikely survivor. But you know something, Susan was always Susan. And I have experienced the care partner journey in dementia in this field, and there's magnitude of orders different and harder,
Yeah.
in part because the person changes. Um, and yet, I'm going to come back. There is this ultimate gift. This is, this is what, love is an obligation in some ways as well. So I love what you're doing. And that I think it helps bring that out the care partner journey here. It needs so much attention, but there, there is so much unknown in the patient journey. Um,
Right.
I'm a little bit curious. Do you know the source of in your family, the dementia, or was it disease, or what was it?
So up until my aunt, the one that I mentioned, we never knew in my family.
Right.
It was only dementia that we knew. So we never talked about it. We never got any more information, or if family members knew, they didn't share it because it wasn't something we talked about.
Like the C
So
word, right?
yeah, right. So I asked my cousin, what was it that my aunt had? And she said, "What do you mean, dementia? She's got dementia." I was like, "That's what the same thing I said because I didn't know there were over 100 types." And I said, "No, go back to the doctor, ask questions, tell them I'm doing this documentary. This is the information we need to know." And so she came back and she said it was Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. And I hadn't heard that to that point. I'm like, "No, let me go and research what is that." And so ultimately, I found out through that research that Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome is a disease, like Alzheimer's is a disease, that is a combination of vitamin B deficiency and the effects of alcoholism. And so Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. And then I have an older aunt that recently passed away about a year and a half ago, who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So the other probably six or seven in the family, we never knew. We just knew dementia.
And that's this is so good, and we're maybe getting a little bit longer. I just want this is so important. So I just want to say that for Alzheimer's, it's really important today to seek help early. There are newer medicines. There's
Right.
also the issue of finding out if you have if you have somebody in your family, either side, who has had Alzheimer's, there's a genetic relationship, and finding out if you have that trait just can make you more aware of being aware of your disease, going to drug trials if need be, and also um, paying more attention to healthy lifestyles, which still has a big effect
Mhm.
on that sort of thing. And my last uh, podcast was about an ant. I don't think you've seen it. And I
Um,
said, "Who's Sam?" My mother's sister was much older than my mother. Um, in my show, I talk about myself as a troublemaker because I used to work for Ralph Nader, and I caused trouble everywhere, good trouble. But um, she was the first, no, she was the 16th woman lawyer in Florida in 1920. She had passed the Florida bar, the Louisiana bar. In offense, I'm from Texas and El Paso and the Texas bar, but eventually she had dementia, but she was also an alcoholic.
Mhm.
And I wonder whether now, because I've been wondering, because it's not from the side of the family that I know had this APOE4 gene, but
Gotcha.
she may have had this syndrome. See, I learned something here in this conversation.
Yeah,
Uh,
it definitely could be possible, and in the African American community, a lot of those issues that are common, such as diabetes, hypertension, things like that, those lead to vascular dementia.
right,
We see, more common in the African American community, whereas maybe some of the other different types are more prevalent in the white community. And it's because of some of those things that you talked about, the cultural lifestyle, where we're living, what we're eating, different things like that that will cause certain things. And so the more we know, the better we are. And that's the purpose of exposed dementia, is to provide the information. What you do with that information is up to you and your family. But my hope and my prayer is that as we share this information, you will share it with the people that you love as well. Continue this conversation. Take that Wernicke-Korsakoff and just look it up and share it with somebody that might never heard of it, but they
right.
might need to know it. And that's what exposed dementia is all about.
Well, that is fabulous. I hope people listen to this, be in touch, donate to you. They can donate to the Dementia Man too. But now we have merch. I assume you can have merch one day. I love that you're using the arts to do this. So I have come, I'm going to feel that for me, it was such an odd and weird turn for, lawyer and advocate and worked for Ralph Nader and all that business. And art has changed me, and it's been the gift to me to be able to do it. And people with the disease and caregivers uh, can engage in it in different ways. So thank you. We will add, this will be up on the Dementia Man next week, and we'll have a link to registration. And I look so forward to being there with you. And as we get to it, finding ways that we can continue to work together. So,
Absolutely.
Chuck, thank
Thank
you
you so
so,
much.
so much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.